I want to tell you about a moment. On the surface, it's quite an ordinary one. It's a Monday morning. You've sat at your desk, you've opened your laptop, and something is different. It's not the desk, it's not the laptop, and it's not the room. What's different is the email address. For the first time in 20 years, the name after the @ symbol is actually your own. It's not the organization and it's not the brand or brands that have been opening doors on your behalf for 2 decades. Just your name. And in that moment, something you've never had to think about before becomes suddenly the most important question of your professional life. Without the institution behind me, does the market know who I am? Welcome to Recognised. I'm Marisha Stevenson, BBC broadcaster, executive facilitator and commercial authority strategist. This is the space where I explore the gap between visibility and authority, between being known and being chosen, and between having expertise and having the expertise recognised in the way that it deserves to be. Today, I want to talk about something I've never heard discussed clearly enough in professional circles. Something I'm calling borrowed authority. What is it? What it does for us without realising, and what happens when it expires. Because I promise you, whether you're inside an institution right now or have already left one, this conversation is for you. Let me start with something that might feel counterintuitive. The biggest mistake most senior professionals make when they leave a significant institution is not the decision to leave. It's the assumption they carry with them when they go. The assumption that the market will receive them in exactly the same way on the other side. That the credibility they have spent decades building will travel with them intact, fully formed, immediately legible to anybody they encounter. And here is what I need you to hear. That assumption is almost universally wrong. And the tragedy, and I use that word deliberately, is not that people discover this. It's when they discover it. Because by the time most people realise what has happened, they have already lost the best 6 months they had to prepare for it. Now let me tell you what borrowed authority actually looks like. Because most people who have it cannot see it. It's too close. It's too woven into the fabric of their daily professional lives. Think about what happens when a senior executive, a C-suite leader, a partner in a major firm, a director of a significant public institution walks into a room. Some things arrive before they do. Their title, their organisation, the brand name on their email address has already opened the door before they've knocked on it. The infrastructure around them, the assistants, the budget, the corporate backing and implied weight of years inside a prestigious institution, all of it is communicating their authority before they have said a single word. That is borrowed authority. And it's doing an enormous amount of work. Work that most people only discover it's doing when it's no longer there to do it. Because then comes that Monday morning and it's just you. Your expertise, your thinking, your network, your track record, all of which are genuinely remarkable. None of which are automatically visible in the way the institution made them. And the door, which used to open with a particular kind of ease, just doesn't open the same way anymore. Sometimes it doesn't open at all. The first time it happens, you assume, oh, they're busy. The second time you wonder, hang on, did I send the email to the wrong address? And by the fifth time, you begin asking a question you've not had to ask yourself in 20 years. Have I overestimated my value? And you haven't. But you have overestimated how much of the authority belonged solely to you. So now I want to give you some context, because we need to be clear about who we're talking about. And I'm going to start with and focus on women, as I am one. Now, according to McKinsey's most recent Women in the Workplace report, women represent nearly half of all entry-level employees. By the time you reach the C-suite, that proportion has fallen to just 29%. Unchanged for 11 consecutive years. And for every 100 men promoted to their first management role, 81 women make the same leap. Now, for women of colour, that number drops to just 54. In the UK, women account for just 32% of executives in the top leadership teams of the FTSE 100. Which means that the woman who has made it to a senior leadership role in that space has not simply worked hard. She has worked harder, been scrutinised more closely, had to prove herself more repeatedly, navigated more structural friction than most of the people around her will ever fully appreciate. By the time she reaches the senior leadership table, she is formidable. And at some point, quietly, almost inevitably, the thought arrives, I could do this for myself. And she's absolutely right. What nobody tells her, though, is what she's about to leave behind. There's another layer to this that I do not think gets discussed honestly enough. When a senior professional leaves an institution and starts describing themselves or herself as a founder, she's stepping into a word that covers an almost incomprehensible range of realities. Founder means Elon Musk, but founder also means someone working from their spare room trying to get their first client. It means the person who has raised significant investment and the person who is wondering where their next month's revenue is coming from. C-suite communicates something completely different immediately and precisely. It tells the room exactly what level of seniority to expect, what kind of decisions this person has been trusted with. Founder communicates almost nothing. For someone who has spent decades in an environment where titles were precise and hierarchies were legible, where the structure told people what to expect of you before you had to say a word, this ambiguity is genuinely disorienting. She's used to process. She's used to established pathways through which seniority gets recognised and rewarded. And now there's no process. There's no ladder. There's just the open market and the question of how quickly she can make her expertise legible to people who do not yet have a clear picture of what she is and what she's worth. And they haven't seen her journey. Over the past year, I have had versions of this conversation more times than I can count. And what strikes me every time is how consistent the experience is across people who are on the surface very different from one another. The C-suite leader stepping into a portfolio career. The senior partner leaving a professional services firm. The NHS director who has led services affecting millions and now finds themselves explaining their credentials to a room that does not already know them. The police chief, the military leader, the university vice-chancellor. All of them extraordinary, all of them accomplished, and all of them discovering to varying degrees of surprise that the institutional scaffolding was doing far more of the communication work than they had ever needed to examine while it was in place. One conversation in particular has stayed with me. A former executive who had led a division responsible for hundreds of millions of pounds. Within 6 months of leaving, she found herself doing something she'd never had to do at that level before, explaining why someone should book an introductory call. Nothing about her credibility had changed. Everything about how the market perceived her had. Because the market had not known her. It had known her organisation and her identity within it. And without that organisation behind her, she was, in the eyes of the people she was now trying to reach, essentially starting from the beginning. And of course, that's a question of trust. That's what happens when borrowed authority expires. And I want to say something that does not often get said in professional conversations. Because when we're having professional conversations, they tend to focus on strategy and solutions rather than the experience underneath them. What I'm describing is a form of loss. It's not dramatic loss, and it doesn't announce itself loudly. But it's a quiet, disorienting loss of an identity that has been built over decades and is now, in its current form, no longer available. And that can be profound. The title, the institutional identity, and the automatic credibility that came with both of those things is gone. The diary full of invitations that arrived because of the organisation you represented, gone. And the introductions that happened because of the brand name attached to your name, gone. Nobody prepares you for that. And because the professional world does not have much language for this kind of transition, many of the people going through it assume something is wrong with them, with their approach, with their capability. When in fact, what they are experiencing is simply the gap between borrowed authority and the independent authority they have not yet had the opportunity to build. That gap is not a reflection of their worth. It's a positioning problem. And the good news is positioning problems have solutions. Here's what I wish most people knew before the transition rather than after. The professionals who navigate this shift most effectively are almost always the ones who begin the work early. They begin building independent authority before they leave, not after. While the structural scaffolding is still in place, while the brand is still lending its credibility, and while the title is still doing its work. That is the window, that's the time. Because borrowed authority, while you still have it, gives you access to rooms, to conversations, to relationships that can be built on your own terms if you're deliberate enough to use that access intentionally. The repositioning does not begin on your last day. It begins while you're still inside the institution. With clarity about who you are becoming and independent of the structure. With deliberate work to ensure that the people who matter most to your professional future understand your expertise in a way that is attached to you, not just to the organisation that you're leaving. Too many people are discovering this after the fact, after the exit, after the quiet, disorienting realization that formidable in one context does not automatically translate to recognised in another. So I want to leave you with something. Institutions do not just employ us, they introduce us. For years, sometimes decades, they have been making introductions on our behalf, communicating our level, our credibility, our authority in ways we never had to think about because we never had to do it ourselves. Which means one of the most important questions any senior professional can ask is not whether they are ready to leave. You probably are. It's whether the market has learnt to recognise you before you do. I built the Media Impact Lab because I kept meeting extraordinary people who are not struggling with capability. They're struggling with translation, with the work of taking expertise that was real, that's deep, that's genuine, hard won, and making it legible to a market that no longer had the institutional context to interpret it on their behalf. If that's where you are, whether you're planning your transition in the middle of it, or even further along than you expected and finding that gap now a little bit wider than it should be. And that's exactly the conversation the Media Impact Lab is built for. The link is in the show notes. And thank you for sticking with me until now. This is Recognised. I am Marisha Stevenson. The full written version of this is on my Substack at marishaspeaks.substack.com. And if this landed for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it as well. And if you know someone who is about to make this transition or is already in the thick of it, please do pass this on. Because the gap between borrowed authority and independent authority is one of the least discussed and most consequential shifts in professional life. And the people who navigate it well are almost always the ones who knew it was coming. Until next time, stay credible, stay visible, and most importantly, stay recognised.